Could CCP leaders Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin live to 150 years old? Well, the two were caught discussing immortality using human organs during a hot mic moment. On another topic, the U.S. military is now waging open war on drug cartels after the Pentagon published a video of a strike killing 11 drug traffickers with the gang Tren de Aragua. I'll be talking about these topics and more today. I'm the Epoch Times senior investigative reporter Joshua Phillip, and you're listening to Crossroads. Welcome to Crossroads. Could Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin be planning to live forever? Immortality they're talking about, or at least until like 150 years old. Well, during a hot mic moment between the two leaders that was live streamed by Chinese state TV, it seems to be that they're discussing it. Now, here's a bit more context of what they're talking about. Bloomberg says the conversation between Xi, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un of North Korea was captured on a live feed as the leaders ascended the Tiananmen Gate in Beijing, where they would observe a ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II on Wednesday, which I should note the CCP takes credit for. It was mostly fought by the United States in the Kuomintang. The CCP actually barely fought in World War II, but the CCP takes credit for it. It adds here, though, it was first flagged by social media users watching festivities around China's military parade. Further, it says a translator then appeared to relay the Russian leader's remarks, saying in Mandarin, quote, "With the development of biotechnology, human organs can be continuously transplanted and people can live younger and younger and even achieve immortality." They're literally talking about living forever using human organ transplants. A separate translator was then heard repeating in Korean a reference to organ transplants. It notes that Xi Jinping then spoke again in Mandarin, and the final comment as the camera cut away, quote, "Predictions are this century there's a chance of also living to 150. Now, that's deeply concerning, given that the CCP harvests organs from prisoners of conscience, killing them literally on demand for their organs. They do this against religious believers. They began expanding it to other groups. The Chinese Communist Party regards human beings as like living sources to live forever, apparently. There have also been documented cases of CCP officials getting multiple transplants, like changing the parts in a car that's breaking down to keep it running. And this is also being fueled by an industry that has a kill-on-demand element. They kill people on demand for this. They use religious believers, others, Falun Gong practitioners being the main group they kill for their organs. Now look, also on the CCP meeting, President Donald Trump commented on this, saying that the countries are conspiring against the United States and he knows what they're up to. Trump said this on Truth Social. He said the big question to be answered is whether or not President Xi of China will mention the massive amount of support and blood that the United States of America gave to China in order to help it to secure its freedom from a very unfriendly foreign invader. Of course, referring to World War II and Japan's incursions into most of the Asia-Pacific region. Now, as is known, the Chinese Communist Party barely fought in World War II. The Kuomintang, which is currently the government of Taiwan, or became the government of Taiwan, did most of the fighting in China. They were also not doing very well until the U.S. Marines came in. And the U.S. Marines pushed the Japanese back to their islands, and then the rest is history. Donald Trump noted, quote, "Many Americans died in China's quest for victory and glory." And he said, "I hope that they are rightfully honored and remembered for their bravery and sacrifice," meaning the United States and its role in this, which the CCP is celebrating really a false victory, saying that they did it when, frankly, the CCP barely did anything. And he said this, quote, "May President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un," quote, "as you conspire against the United States of America." President Donald J. Trump. Trump basically said, hey, don't forget we did most of the fighting. We basically won the war for you guys. Also, I know exactly what you're up to. Enjoy conspiring against us because we're watching. Now, look, on another topic, the U.S. military is also now doing something else. The U.S. military is fighting another war, this time, ironically, against the CCP by proxy because they're the ones behind it, but fighting a war against the drug cartels, not just the ones in Mexico, but all around Latin America. And they're already killing them like any other terrorists. The Pentagon even published a video of a strike, again, just like they do on other terrorist groups, that killed 11 drug traffickers with the gang Tren de Aragua. The gang members were in the Caribbean. They were trafficking drugs in a boat. They blew them up. As you can see from the video, there's a boat that's traveling in the sea, and then suddenly a big flash of white light, that is the alleged strike, hits the boat and is seen catching fire as smoke erupts. And now those drug traffickers are no longer with us. They've gone to another place. And also now the administration has announced that this is just the beginning. You can expect a lot more videos like this. And we'll see if they publish all of them, but This is the new war. Let me show you this. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth discussed the recent strike with Fox and Friends.
The president put that video of him eviscerating, blowing up that boat coming across with all of the drugs on board. And the president said on social, on Truth Social, let them be on notice to anybody bringing drugs to the U.S. Beware. So the president is sending a message to other cartels, right?
A very clear one. I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States, trying to poison our country with illicit drugs. Last year, under the Biden administration, all 4 years, 100,000 Americans died from drug-related from drugs, from the use of drugs, many of which poured in from Central and South America through our southwest border. Now, we're sealing the border, but President Trump is willing to go on offense in ways that others have not been, and to send that clear signal to Tren de Aragua, Cartel del Sols, and others emanating from Venezuela. We're not going to allow this kind of activity. You're poisoning our people. We've got incredible assets, and they are gathering in the region. And so you want to try to traffic drugs? It's a new day. It's a different day. And so those 11 drug traffickers are no longer with us, sending a very clear signal that this is an activity the United States is not going to tolerate in our hemisphere.
Now, this is interesting. Basically, what Hegseth is saying, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, they knew who was on the boat. They knew who these people were. They knew who they represented, meaning they knew which gang they were with. And they also knew other information on these individuals. Now, to me, what does that say? It suggests that U.S. military intelligence is engaged in these operations. And they know that these individuals are with what gang. They know the drug trades happen. They know when they're trafficking things. In other words, they know they're being watched. And interestingly as well, they published a video and then announced it publicly. They want this to be known. Importantly as well, the Tren de Aragua gang members were traveling to Venezuela and were moving back, trafficking drugs from there, suggesting as well that the military is watching Venezuelan cartel operations. And that's important also because who's leading the cartel in Venezuela? Allegedly Nicolas Maduro, according to the Trump administration, although he denies it. Now, President Donald Trump also discussed a strike and also what comes next. This is during a presser on Tuesday.
And there's more where that came from. We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And these came out of Venezuela and coming out very heavily from Venezuela. A lot of things are coming out of Venezuela. So we took it out, and you'll get to see that after this meeting is over.
Now, as all this is going on, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he's holding meetings in Latin America. Specifically, he's speaking with the governments of Mexico and Ecuador about their, again, leaders working with the United States to end illegal immigration, and also about the emerging war on the drug cartels. Now, what's my personal take? Nothing that has been done to stop the cartels so far has worked. They've tried doing law enforcement, doesn't work. They buy off the judges, they buy off the police, they buy off the sheriffs. This has happened all around Latin America. There have been cases where the heads, the local police chief is working for the cartels. It doesn't work. The countries are too corrupt. Corruption has found its way into the bloodstream of most of Latin America. They are so utterly corrupt they can't have law and order. Nothing has worked on law enforcement. They've been trying it for decades. It does not work. The other option is put them in jail. What happens if you put a cartel member in jail? Well, they build prison gangs, and sometimes they even run the operations of the cartels out of the prisons. Then they buy off the guards and basically live like kings in the prisons. It does not work, or their cartels bail them out, and nothing's done against it unless the United States steps in. Just like any other major business also, what happens when you have a cartel leader arrested? They appoint a new CEO, quote unquote, right? They find a new leader because these are major businesses. These are multi-billion-dollar businesses, and they operate just like that. The only difference being they kill people in the open. Now, the roots of the cartel, they're very deep in a lot of Latin America. In the United States, we often talk about the Mexican drug cartels. It's not just Mexico. It's most of Latin America. Drug cartels have effectively destabilized most of the governments. To the extent that even if a government official is trying to run for office and saying we're going to do something about it, the cartels kill that person. You've had assassination attempts against many, many officials trying to come up throughout Latin America. And oftentimes the cartels even succeed in those killings. It's to the extent that, again, the U.S. government is even accusing the leaders, the presidents of some countries, of being also the leaders of cartels. Remember, Biden administration designation says the president of Venezuela is the leader of the cartel of the Suns. How do you have a president of a country also being the leader of a drug cartel? Unfortunately, that's the nature of it. When a cartel finds its way into government, when it's allowed to operate for too long, it begins to control the entire country. And the United States, as it's moving in now, treating the cartels as terrorists, meaning the United States will kill them. That brings up a lot of concerns around what it means for these countries because, well, what does it mean if you fight a terrorist group? It means you get videos like the one we just watched. They bomb them from the sky. What does it mean when an entire country is controlled by a terrorist group? It means we go to war with them. So we'll see what happens with this. Currently, the United States is looking to stop these operations. Currently, the United States is taking other means to achieve this. We'll see where it goes as they hold talks with the leaders of various countries. On that front, President Donald Trump had given a threat very early on, and this was interesting. Donald Trump effectively acknowledged, we know the governments of many countries in Latin America are run by the cartels. We know many of you are corrupt. We know a lot of you are bought off. We know a lot of you work with the cartels. Trump effectively stated this openly. And what he said was this: we're going to kill the cartels. We're going to go after them, effectively. And if any government in Latin America tries to stop it, the U.S. government will expose the officials who are doing that and their ties to the cartel, which is an interesting way of handling it. Trump was discussing this while he was still on the campaign trail. Effectively, what he said is, we know you're corrupt. We're not going to talk about it unless you try to stop us. If they try to stop the United States from going after the cartels, the United States will expose the officials who are doing that, and then we'll see what happens to those officials, again, as the United States is killing the cartels in these countries. A very big deal, by the way. On that point also, the United States, again, they're talking about waging war within Latin America. They're currently talking about this. They're currently talking about waging war in Mexico against the cartels. The Mexican government is desperately trying to stop this from happening. It is known that many officials in the Mexican government are basically with the cartels. We'll see if Trump exposes that and puts his money where his mouth is, because he was saying he was going to do it. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. The other big thing happening now is the U.S. government is also working with the government of Panama to do law enforcement in Haiti. And they're talking about deploying, again, forces to Haiti to put down the gang members there, which are effectively trying to take over the entire country, which also caused mass illegal immigration to the United States. They're talking about putting the gang members back in jail. So we'll see where this goes. In other words, the United States is becoming much more involved in Latin America, something that has not happened for a very long time. Now, in other news, Florida is officially ending all vaccine mandates from its state law. This is not just the COVID vaccine. This is all vaccine mandates. This happens as President Donald Trump has directed vaccine companies, notably, to show the positive impacts of Operation Warp Speed and the creation of the COVID shots. Now, let me show you this. This is Florida's Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Lopado, making this announcement during a press conference.
What I'm most excited about is an announcement that we're going to make, that we're making now, which is that the Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery. Okay? Who am I as a government, or anyone else, or who am I as a man standing here now, to tell you what you should put in your body? Who am I to tell you what your child should put in your body? I don't have that right. Your body is a gift from God. What you put into your body is because of your relationship with your body and your God. I don't have that right. Government does not have that right. They want you to believe they have that right. And unfortunately, they've been successful. They've been successful.
Now, what's important with this is they're talking about the end of all vaccine mandates, all of them, not just the COVID shots. I know some people would argue, well, look, they never mandated any vaccine. Nobody ever held you down and, forced it into your arm. It's complicated. On the COVID shots, people say, look, nobody forced you to take it. You had an option. You can force people through coercion. If you're telling people you're going to be fired from your job, or you can't travel, or your kid can't go to school, or if you do it, you're going to be investigated by Child Protective Services, yeah, that's coercing people, and that's a mandate. Or if you're in the military and they're like, look, you're going to be dishonorably discharged if you don't do it, yeah, that's called coercion, and that's called a mandate. They're forcing you to do it. The argument that it was not forced on people is utterly ridiculous and completely false. It's true they didn't hold people down and stick it in their arms, but it did everything short of that. But again, Florida was kind of leading the charge on the rights of your individual choice, let's say. In Florida, a lot of these mandates did not stand. And so some people would say, well, why does Florida even care about this? They don't have the mandates to begin with. The big issue is probably the child vaccine schedules. Currently in the United States, there's a big battle between different regulatory groups on whether or not kids going to public schools need to get vaccinated. They have their child vaccine schedules. Some of that is controlled again by the federal system. And again, parents don't necessarily have a choice. If they refuse it, the kid can't go to school. If the kid can't go to school, you might get investigated by the federal government. They don't have a choice. Again, you could say, well, you always have a choice. Well, if your choice is between having your kid taken away from you or not, that's not much of a choice. Now, on this point, we'll see what Florida does. They're moving the ball on it. Things are just beginning to change. What's important here also, the vaccines are still there if people want them. They're not saying you can't get them. The difference is you're no longer being forced or incentivized against your will to get them. Now, look, in other news, President Donald Trump, he's looking to use his D.C. anti-crime model in other states all across the United States. This is Donald Trump explaining his big plan.
If you look at Washington, D.C., 3 weeks ago, it was the same or worse. And now it's considered a totally safe zone. Restaurants are open. They're bustling. Restaurants, you have to see, restaurants were dying. Nobody wanted to go out. They didn't want to be attacked. They didn't want to be mugged. Washington, D.C. is a totally safe city. You're not reporting any crime because there is none. They said crime is down 87%, and I said, no, it's not. It's down 100%. We have a great thing going. I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago, or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite, quite tough, quite bad. So we're going to be going to maybe Louisiana, and you have New Orleans, which has a crime problem. We'll straighten that out in about 2 weeks. It'll take us 2 weeks, easier than D.C. But we could straighten out Chicago. All they have to do is ask us to go into Chicago if we don't have the support of some of these politicians. But I'll tell you who is supporting us, the people of Chicago. And I sort of want them to let it be known they have incompetent people. A guy like...
So where is it going? Possibly to a state near you. It's just, Trump says, it could be Chicago, it could be New Orleans, it might be New York. We'll have to wait and see. If you want to find out what it is, just sit tight and we'll find out. Trump is suggesting plans are now in place to replicate the D.C. model elsewhere. Coming to a city near you, they're planning for the next location for it within the next couple weeks. On that front, also, discussions are underway on whether it's going to be Chicago. Other officials in the Trump administration are saying not yet, so probably not Chicago is the next step. You do have some states that are more open to working with the federal government on anti-crime measures. It's possible it could be those places first. Chicago is going to be a little more difficult because Chicago is creating even like local orders to prevent local officials from working with the federal government. They're trying to protect, their helpless criminals against crime crackdowns. And on that point also, Trump's anti-crime initiatives in Washington, D.C., they appear to be working. Actually, it's turning things around. Something very strange happened. It looks like Donald Trump even won over support from the Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser. Breitbart said this. They said Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, issued an executive order Tuesday directing the Metropolitan Police Department to work and cooperate with federal law enforcement officials indefinitely, meaning from here on out, not even just after martial law ends. And it's like semi-martial law right now. They federalized the district. They note a press release from Bowser's office stated that the mayor's order, quote, continues the work of the Safe and Beautiful Emergency Operations Center in managing the district's response to the Safe and Beautiful Task Force, which was established by President Donald Trump. Importantly on that, the Safe and Beautiful Task Force is a multi-government agency at the federal level operation to make D.C. safe and beautiful. What's really interesting, though, is that, again, Democrats, local officials, they were very against Trump doing this at first. Muriel Bowser in Washington, D.C., I don't know if she's flipping on every issue, but at least on law enforcement, she is. She actually came out and acknowledged that Donald Trump's actions in Washington, D.C. actually look like they're working. She acknowledged actually crime is going down. It's working. And that's an interesting kind of break from the lockstep movement trying to push back against these types of actions elsewhere. As things currently stand, the most controversial areas Trump's going to have trouble with, Chicago, California, and the entire state of California, because Governor Gavin Newsom is really trying to stop this. And again, Los Angeles has even made local judicial orders determining that Trump cannot do this. So again, there's a legal battle alongside this. My personal take on it, when Trump looks to expand these operations elsewhere, what will likely happen is this. The judicial ruling at the appeals court in Los Angeles is going to be used by other districts to say the federal government cannot work here. You have no power here, Donald Trump. When they try to do local law enforcement using National Guard or otherwise, they will probably file lawsuits. Again, they judge shop. They'll go to the one who's going to rule in their favor. They'll get it blocked. That's going to be in place basically until the Supreme Court makes a determination. It's going to be like that till it goes to the Supreme Court. That might take months. That might take years. What Trump will likely do in the interim is try to avoid that. And so what I assume is going to happen, he's going to go for places where he has some degree of local support to use the federal government to put down crime. And the Washington, D.C. / Los Angeles model Those are going to be the models to do this. We'll see how it goes going forward. Also in Breitbart, they said this. The order from Bowser comes as Trump in early August announced that he was officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act, and that the MPD, the local police, will be placed under direct federal control. Trump also activated the National Guard. Importantly on that, the model for Washington, D.C. cannot be used wholesale elsewhere. And part of the reason for that is the Home Rule Act. Again, Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. That basically is because, again, Washington, D.C. is a unique area. It's the, again, capital of the United States. And it's under a kind of different rule of law. What is being done in Washington, D.C. cannot necessarily be done everywhere unless you get buy-in from the local governments. The governor says, okay, you can deploy the National Guard, we will allow it, and so on. They cannot fully do it. There are some side doorways Trump could do this. For example, declaring martial law, declaring a national emergency. That also risks backfiring. That could have an opposite effect. And again, does he want to do that right before the midterm elections? We will see. Now, another point, though, with Washington, D.C. and Muriel Bowser now saying that they're going to work with the federal government now. She is now cooperating with Donald Trump. That new policy, they're saying, is indefinite, meaning for now and forevermore until they cancel it. Federal crime, federal law enforcement in Washington, D.C., it's here to stay for the indefinite future. Unless, again, a new president comes in and they cancel it, or a new mayor comes in and they cancel it. What is now happening in Washington, D.C. is the model. That is how it's going to be done going forward there. Now, that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into a discussion. So first off, Asha from California, you're saying, good luck with that. Your body will deteriorate. Are you going to get joint and limb transplants? You're talking about Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un talking about using human organ transplants to live forever. They actually said, quote unquote, immortality. They want to become immortals by using the bodies of other people. It's kind of freaky, actually. It's kind of like a Dr. Frankenstein thing when you think about it. On your point, too, I don't think it's going to work. Even if they kill 100 people, even if Kim Jong-un rolls around with like 4 hearts and 3 kidneys and, whatever else. This is the bigger picture with it. When you get an organ transplant, you need to take medication like then and forevermore, or your body's gonna reject the organ. That medication compromises your immune system to a large extent. And so while you might not die from heart failure, not as easily, you could still have a heart attack with a good heart. It's not like it's impossible. You can still have random health problems, or your body can just reject the organ and you can die anyways, which happens a lot also. But even if you, again, have all healthy organs, but they're somebody else's organs who you killed for their organs, what can also happen is because you're effectively immunocompromised, you get the flu one day and you die. And that's also a very real risk. Just because they're doing this does not mean they're going to live forever like they think they are. On this point also, the bigger narrative with this is live organ harvesting of, again, religious dissidents in China. What's important with that, even aside from what's happening with the CCP itself, even aside from all that, the Chinese Communist Party does organ tourism. And so what the CCP is doing with organ harvesting, it's not just related to China. They try to bring in officials from other countries. Hey, come get your organ transplant. We'll kill somebody so you can live. They do it to children. Hey, your kid has a problem. Bring your kid here. We'll murder another child and give your child their organs. They do that. They do this. And this is the real crazy thing. So I've actually talked to doctors who work on, again, there are doctors like Doctors Against Forced Organ Transplant, DAFO, right? Doctors Against Forced Organ Operations, right? You have doctors internationally who work on this. And some of the concerns they've raised are terrifying. They're noting that because the CCP, again, basically does so many organ transplants because they don't have to wait like most countries do. If you try to get a heart transplant in the United States, you get put on a wait list. They wait for somebody to die in a car accident, usually. And then again, the heart, if the person's a donor, the heart goes up for donation or whatever else goes up for donation. You can get the transplant, but again, you have to wait till someone dies and they're a willing donor to get it. In China, it doesn't work like that. Again, it can take months, it can take years. In China, they say, okay, you need a heart transplant. When do you want to have it done? You want to have it done today, tomorrow, next week? Let us know, because all they have to do is just pull someone off the shelf, murder them, and take their heart. Because the CCP has the policy of murdering people for their organs through the government. In fact, it's mostly military hospitals. It's mostly the Chinese military doing it. Because, again, they run hospitals. Because they do it so often, the Chinese Communist Party is becoming the quote-unquote leader in organ transplants. It's not even just organs. They take the skin. They skin people. I mean, horrifying stories. Even outside of using religious believers, some of the stories of how they take people's skin is disgusting. There was a story that came out, and this was an actual criminal, but still, criminals are still human beings, right? And again, you never know with the CCP because they don't necessarily have a good judicial system. Like, the guy might have been innocent. They needed organs. They took a criminal, and again, a guy accused of actual crimes, not like because he believed in God, right? Like an actual criminal, allegedly. They shoot him in the head. The guy doesn't die. They shot him in the head, he doesn't die, right? He's still alive. They say the doctors go on this guy, like there were articles on this. This is documented stuff, right? The doctors go on this guy like piranhas in a feeding frenzy. Because they have to act quickly, cut his organs out. The guy is still alive while they're doing it, and they skin him while he's still alive. And that is the lighter end of it, right? That is the lighter end of what it looks like, because that guy was, a criminal. And I think even that is horrifying. The scary thing is when they do it to religious believers, or to where they're at now, where they're running out of religious believers and they're scooping people up off the streets and doing it. There are terrifying videos going viral in China right now where you have people dressing up like doctors or police, and they're grabbing people off the streets and stuffing them in the back of vehicles. And there's a lot of concerns in China that these are organ traffickers and they're abducting people for their organs. There's a lot of concerns about this. There was a video going viral in China. They grab a woman off the street. She's screaming for help, saying, "I don't know who these people are. I did nothing wrong. They're kidnapping me." But because the human traffickers, the human organ traffickers, they just put on uniforms and act like they're police, or maybe they are police and just corrupt. They can do whatever they want. In China, under the Chinese Communist Party, they have destroyed people's empathy to a very large degree. This is why you can have a truck driver run over like a 2-year-old child, and 20 people walk by a child dying on the ground and don't do anything to help. They've been conditioned to not care about it. It is terrifying, the lack of empathy that has been instilled in some people by the Chinese Communist Party, because it destroyed religion, it destroyed morality, and it destroyed culture. The lack of care for another human being is horrifying. It's like a nightmare. Now, on that front, the Chinese Communist Party mainly uses Falun Gong practitioners for its organ transplants. This has been affirmed by international bodies, including, for example, in the United Kingdom, where a tribunal held its own court determined, yes, in fact, the Chinese Communist Party does harvest the organs of religious believers, the largest group being Falun Gong practitioners. Falun Gong or Falun Dafa, it's basically Tai Chi You know, like you ever see people doing like slow movements in the parks? It's basically that combined with like Buddhist moral teachings. That's basically what Falun Dafa is. Buddhist moral teachings combined with like Tai Chi meditation. Effectively, that's what it looks like for most of the world, right? The problem the CCP had was there were too many people practicing, 70 to 100 million by 1999. And when the Chinese Communist Party determined there's too many people practicing, what do? The former head of the Chinese Communist Party, Jiang Zemin, says, destroy it, destroy their reputations, destroy them physically, kill them. Bankrupt them, this was the quote, bankrupt them, destroy their reputations, destroy them physically. Kill them, defame them, rob them, basically. They launched campaigns of mass persecution and then created propaganda to justify it. Most media outside of China has been repeating the CCP's propaganda justifying the persecution. And so when New York Times does these fake articles saying, oh, the Chinese Communist Party calls it a cult, there's nothing saying it's a cult other than the CCP saying it. That is the basis of that entire argument. And then you have all these other media just repeating it because the CCP says it. It's like saying, a guy goes to the gym once a week. You know, the government says it's illegal to do it. And so if you go to the gym once a week, you're part of like a dangerous movement and we're going to kill you for your organs for it. And the whole world turns a blind eye to it because they don't know what the guy is doing because it's like a workout method they're unfamiliar with. That's basically what it is. The lack of empathy of the world, businesses, investors, as this is taking place is horrifying. The lack of empathy of governments turning a blind eye to such a massive atrocity happening as we speak is horrifying. Now, I should note, to the benefit of the United States, most of Congress has actually condemned the live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. In fact, it was almost unanimous. In the House of Representatives, they did pass the Falun Gong Protection Act, acknowledging the CCP is in fact doing this. There have been many petitions signed, affirmed on this. Most of the House of Representatives has affirmed this is happening. Most of the House of Representatives have actually stepped forward to defend Falun Gong against the CCP. It still hasn't gone through the Senate yet, but for the most part, that has happened. In the United Kingdom, again, a tribunal has determined this. In Canada, the Canadian government has come out very supportive of Falun Gong, has acknowledged the persecution is happening and has stood against it, as have other countries, including Germany and others. And so, there are governments calling it out, but the problem is a lot of the media doesn't report it. For the most part, a lot of news outlets are eating out of the CCP's hand, and they're repeating Chinese Communist Party propaganda, ironically designed to justify the persecution. And unfortunately, what that means is a lot of what people hear about the persecution is just the CCP fake propaganda. People are being propagandized to look down on a group of people being murdered solely for trying to be good people. That's what's happening. People trying to be kind, to be honest, and who believe in, peacefully enduring are being murdered, and the world is being taught to think badly of them because the CCP says so. It is horrifying. Where have people's consciences gone? Anyways, on that point, the other problem you're going to have is this. The Chinese Communist Party, because they've now created a business, an international business of murdering people for their organs, you can say, well, I don't know what this group is. Why do I care? Or, I don't know them well enough to say whether I care about it or not. It's moving on to other groups because they're running out of people to kill. They're moving on to other people. They're even doing it in other countries now. There were reports coming out, for example, in different parts of the Middle East where they're killing children for their organs. They're trafficking kids for their organs. They're killing dissident groups for their organs. There were reports of people fleeing Ukraine and Russian or, Slavic organ harvesters and organ traffickers are taking people's kids and taking people and killing them for their organs as well. This is moving to other countries because the world has turned a blind eye to it. It's happening in Latin America. Cartels are doing it now because it's a business. And it's a business the world has turned a blind eye to and allowed to happen. The longer the world turns a blind eye to this, the longer the world does not condemn it, the longer the world does not stand up to it, the more this is going to happen and the more it's going to become normalized. As the CCP now is talking with the leaders of Russia and North Korea on this, they're going to be normalizing this. And as they normalize it, you have to understand, and I'm not trying to preach too much here, there's two forces that regulate international power, okay? You have the above board systems and then you have the below board systems. Not every country engages in this, but a lot of them do. You have the surface world and you have the underworld. Many countries want to control both. What do I mean by that? The Chinese Communist Party has its front organizations. On the surface, you have outreach, you have community organizations, you have corporate investment outreach. Tied with that, you have the criminal organizations, you have the triads, the Chinese mafia. The CCP controls both. They're engaged in, let's say, above board operations. Hey, let's start a business in your country. They're also, the same groups are involved in below board operations. Hey, let's bribe this official. Let's traffic these people. Let's bring drugs into the United States. This is why it's coming out of the CCP is the main force behind the fentanyl epidemic, right? They're the drug traders. They're involved in the drug trade. Same thing in most of Latin America. You have the above board operations, the governments, and the many good things they do. And a lot of them are tied in with the cartels. They run the criminal underworld as well. They run the above situation and they run the below situation. They control both. Same thing with Russia. The Russian mafia is deeply tied in with the Russian government. Same thing with North Korea. The government itself is an underworld economy. What are the main trades of North Korea? Drugs, counterfeiting of cash, and arms trafficking. That's their economy. They're a global underworld economy. In fact, a lot of the weapons they sell are they're the two largest arms traffickers in Iran. They're the two largest arms traffickers in most of the Middle East. They're an underworld economy. And if you start adding into the underworld economy globally human organ trafficking, that is going to become, let's put it this way, how hard is it to get an illegal gun? Kind of hard because, it's supply and demand, right? You can buy guns in the United States. It's not that hard in other countries. If you go to Latin America, Brazil, Mexico, where guns are regulated and controlled by the government, you can easily buy an illegal firearm. Drugs are banned in the United States. How well has that worked? How hard is it to find drugs? What's going to happen when they add human organs to the list of products? In some countries, that's already happening. In some countries, that is already normal. And that is going to become bigger as it is continually allowed to happen. And unfortunately, I would say the media is partly responsible for this, for the covering up of the genocide of Falun Gong and the live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners, because they don't want to make the CCP mad. That's the truth of it. They don't want to offend the Chinese Communist Party, so they let it happen. That is the truth of what's happening. Anyways, another question here. Flying Squirrel, he's saying Venezuela equals narcocracy. And it's been true for a long time. A lot, again, we talk about underworld economies. It is the unfortunate state. Many countries, a lot of their economy is underworld economy, right? Back to the point I was making. A lot of countries, a good chunk of their GDP is underworld economy. They don't think like we do, right? Good people don't think like this. That's the problem. Good people don't think like this. Most Americans, we only focus on the surface world economy. When we think about business, when we think about making money, for the most part, not everybody, You know, we think the big corporations, we think Microsoft and Samsung, like my laptop, and Apple, we think Google, we think Walmart, we think 7-Eleven and McDonald's. Like, you know, we're thinking like that. We're thinking blue collar jobs, construction. We know there's some gang activity, but it's kind of on the fringes of society. Understand, there are economies and businesses just as large as these corporations that exist purely in the underworld economies. You have Microsoft and Samsung and so on. Then in other parts of the world, you have the Sinaloa cartel, the cartel of the Suns, the Triads, the Russian mafia. You have all these gangs, and they're also running multi-billion-dollar businesses. Again, the above world and the underworld. And unfortunately, there are many countries, their economy is underworld economy. We regard them as normal countries. They are not. Their economy, their GDP, is underworld economy, and that's normal for them. It is a different way of looking at the world, and a lot of people don't understand this. The Chinese Communist Party, they do both. The Chinese Communist Party, the above and below are integrated completely into their system. They do both almost simultaneously, including with diplomacy. One of the reasons, notably, why it's so hard for the U.S. to compete with China abroad. When Chinese officials go to other countries and want to make business deals or get contracts, they'll bring like 1/10 of their budget just for bribery. They bribe everybody. Americans can't really do that. You know, you get arrested for it, right? It doesn't apply to them, again, because they're above and below economies. They don't play by the same rules. Former Fly Girl, you're saying, forcing people through financial coercion. This is how BlackRock has pushed DEI through ESG. Yeah, well, you know, that's actually an interesting point, because we were talking about, we were talking about the vaccine mandates and whether it was actually mandated. You did have a choice. Your choice was do you want to keep your job or not? Do you like having your kid living in your home with you, or would you rather have them be taken to a government home? You know, because you did have them threatening to take people's kids away because they're saying, you know, you're not being responsible to your child if you don't get them vaccinated. There's been stuff like that, right? You're noting that's a type of financial coercion. They're using your financial well-being as a form of coercion. You know, the interesting point with DEI and ESG, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of the race and gender politics, and then ESG, which was like the environmental politics. What's interesting is this. The calculation with a lot of people who are pushing those two initiatives was basically they have monopolies, and if they use the entire monopoly to force an agenda, then there's going to be no other alternative. So every business, if they want to have investors, you need to adopt the environmental policies. Every movie, every major production, every major show, if you want money, if you want investment, if you want the TV spots, you need to have the gender politics and you need to have the race politics, right? Or you don't get it made. The calculation they had was basically they could enforce social change and, you know, corporate policy by basically restricting investment, right? Because a lot of this was done by investment firms that, you know, wanted to create social agendas. We're only going to give money to people if they're you know, net zero, if they help fight against global warming, if they believe in equity, right? Equity based on race and gender. They would only give you money. They would only invest in you. They would only do it if you played the game. Now that created a big problem for corporations, because what happens if you're the CEO of a company and you make a policy that goes against investors? You might violate the law, right? You could violate the law. Or at the very least, you know, the board is going to be unhappy with you because you made Maybe you make a commercial and you didn't make it diverse enough, and then the investors pull out because the investors are part of a big investment firm, not individuals, and they're going to give you or deny you money based on whether or not you align with these ideals. Stock crashes, you get booted, maybe you get criminally investigated, right? And so it was using financial coercion as a way to force change, to force policy. Now, the other argument, and I think this is the one that has come about, is that's basically extortion, right? Were these companies extorting businesses? Were these companies engaged in were these investment firms engaged in illegal activity going against what is the the fiduciary requirements that these companies had to follow? Because what happened was this. You could say it was in favor of the investors, but it was not in favor of the, you and I who goes to buy the product. When you or I went to the store and the store has some really weird looking dude drinking a beer and telling us, tee hee, drink my beer with me, we might say, no, thank you. I think I'll go elsewhere. Hey, watch this movie I made for your kids where I try to convince your kids that they're gender confused. No, thank you. I'll take my child elsewhere. And what happened was those products failed. Nobody wanted them. And so, the markets, the culture rejected that stuff. And they found that, you can use a monopoly to try to force things on the public. But if the public doesn't want it, it's not going to work. And what you've seen now, the cultural shift, has really pushed it back. The investment firms are pushing those things. They're being criminally investigated in some states. The businesses are rejecting it because they're finding that it's failing. And those entire movements are now failing because they pushed it too far. People are rejecting it. It's a very interesting change, I think. Denise B., you're saying, I've always wondered what is done with the drugs confiscated by U.S. authorities. How do they get rid of those toxic chemicals, especially fentanyl? What about the drugs released into the seawater off the Venezuelan coast now, for example, affecting seafood? Yeah, that is a problem. I've seen different takes on this. Did I say gender confused? I think I said gender confused, James. Anyways, back to this point, you're asking what happens to all these drugs and stuff. I've seen different takes on it. I have seen reports that some sea life actually has developed drug problems. So they're finding trace drug quantities in sharks and stuff. And the argument they were given is that apparently, I guess when drug traffickers are caught or something like that, they throw the drugs overboard. I don't know, I guess sharks tend to eat it. I mean, look, I'm just telling you what I read in some news articles, right? I mean, I haven't interviewed the sharks, right? This is hearsay based on news reporting, right? Until I get an interview with a shark, why do you eat the drugs? We're not going to know for sure, okay? But this is what I heard. They have been seeing this. And it's actually raised some studies where scientists are looking into it. Are the sharks addicted to drugs? Are they just mistaking the drug packages for jellyfish or something? I don't know. In other words, you have had some problems with this. You have had some issues where drugs get dumped into the waters and it does cause problems. I mean, look, it's not gonna be enough to cause major problems because the ocean's a very big place and even a package of very toxic fentanyl is not gonna pollute the ocean that much. Police departments often do destroy drugs. They have different laboratories that are certified to destroy toxic chemicals. It's not just drugs they do it for. They do it for for example, do you all remember when I went to California and I investigated that Chinese virus lab? I'm not joking, right? Remember when local authorities discovered the Chinese virus lab that was operating in Southern California? And if you haven't watched the feature I did on that, check it out. It was crazy stuff. So I went to that virus lab. That was the one where local officials were saying they found Ebola, and then they said the whole thing was fake and they wrote it off. The truth of the matter is they never investigated it. They had refrigerators at a Chinese-run virus lab in California with vials of unknown substances labeled in Chinese, some not labeled at all, some labeled with codes. They did have live COVID-19, a lot of other things. Part of what the lab was allegedly doing is they were creating counterfeit COVID test kits and other test kits. In one of the refrigerators, they had a piece of paper with Ebola written on it, which raised concerns that one of the vials contained Ebola. The truth of the matter is they never investigated it. The federal government never looked into it. The FDA never checked. To this day, we don't know what was in those vials. The local officials were basically told, deal with it. When they tried asking for federal help, they had to call in it's like a third-party organization that destroys dangerous chemicals for laboratories. They had to pay with it with local taxpayer dollars out of their own pockets. And so to this day, we don't know what was actually in that laboratory. But my point in noting this is there are groups you can hire to dispose of toxic chemicals. And so police will work with those sometimes. The other more controversial side is things like Fast and Furious, where sometimes they turn it around and they use the drugs to actually try to infiltrate drug trafficking organizations. I know some people are like, wow, they're engaged in the drug trade. I'm not here to tell you what is and what isn't, right? You can believe what you want in conclusion. The argument they use for that is that if you're trying to infiltrate, let's put it this way. If you have an undercover police officer or agent and they're infiltrating a major gang, that guy is going to have to do drugs with that gang. They're not going to have a choice. If you're sitting at a table with a bunch of Hell's Angels and they put a line of drugs on a table and they're all doing it, and you're like straight edge, I'm not going to do it, they're going to put a gun to your head and blow your brains out. They're not going to let you do that. So you need to participate, especially in Latin America where you're dealing with cartels and stuff. They'll slit your throat or make you fight in their gladiator rings, which they have, by the way. You're not going to have a choice. And so in order to infiltrate those networks, they do use drugs, and some of that is drugs that they capture, according to reports. Again, believe what you want on the narratives because I know it's a controversial topic. Fast and Furious being one of the better known ones. Denise B, you're saying, I've always wondered what is done with the drugs. I already asked that. Anyways, folks, yeah, to your point, I don't think there's enough drugs in the ocean to affect seafoods. You don't got to worry about that. You're more got to worry about mercury and stuff. So hopefully not too much of that. Anyways, everybody, it is Thursday. So again, we're going to have a special episode tomorrow, Prime Time, or new show. Prime Time is also now on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, be sure to check it out. We're actually calling it now Prime Time Unscripted. How do you like that? Prime Time Unscripted. Be sure to check that out. We're on YouTube now, not just NTD. We have a great time doing that show. That's me, Roman from Facts Matter, a lot of the team at NTD, Tiffany Myers, Cindy Drukier, Shelby, of course, Shelby has a new show. If you haven't checked it out, it's called Codex Legendarium, also on YouTube. She's a flower child, as some of you know. She's a great girl. And she does good stuff too, so be sure to check it out. But again, join us for that tomorrow. That's again, Primetime Unscripted, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot of fun with it. I think a lot of you watch it, really enjoy it too. Let me know what you think. That said, I will see you then. In the meantime, please do not forget to share this episode. Thank you all so much. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, stay free. Thank you.